Season 6 of my podcast. Today, my guest is Leah Garcés, who is the CEO and President of Mercy for Animals. Leah has nearly 20 years of leadership experience in the animal protection movement. She is also the author of the book Grilled, Turning Adversaries into Allies to Change the Chicken Industry. Hi Leah, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, Vedant, for having me. I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on my show.
Me too.
So are you ready to start?
I am very curious what you might ask me.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm curious to know what ignited your passion for animal advocacy, leading you into the movement.
Truly, what ignited me was my love of animals. I actually grew up in Florida, and in my backyard were ducks, wild ducks. And when I was not your age, but maybe even a bit younger, I would lay on my belly in the porch and through a screen could see a mother duck laying her eggs and creating a nest. And I loved doing this, and I would watch the whole process of them hatching, the first time they'd go out into the water, and I just really realized that these animals were full of emotions and joy and drama. Ducks are very dramatic, if you don't know this. They do bullying, and they have drama, and they have love affairs. And I watched these ducks and thought, I love them, and I love animals, and they are so deserving of a life worth living and happiness and all the things. And then when I became about 15, I watched a documentary where I learned how farmed animals are treated. And I was so shocked that I had been part of a system that harmed these animals that I loved so much that I almost overnight became an activist for animals.
Well, that's really amazing. I mean, it must have been really fun having all of those animals in your backyard, right?
Oh, I loved it. And I still love the animals of Florida, whether even alligators, ducks, otters, and seeing and trying to understand them, observe them and understand their inner lives is something I still love to do with animals.
It's really sad to see how they're treated, right?
It is very sad, and I imagine their inner lives are very depressed, they're very sad, they suffer a lot in our food system. And so I'm very motivated to give them a life that they deserve as sentient beings, worthy of respect and freedom that I think is so important.
Could you walk us through your journey from your initial involvement in animal advocacy to assuming the role of the president at MFA?
Yes. So I went to college to study zoology because I wanted to be a vet. And I was very convinced that I didn't know there was another way to help animals. I thought you had to be a vet to help animals. And when I finished my degree, my mentor, he said to me, "Oh, you don't want to be a vet." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because vets are plumbers. They fix animals once they're already broken, and I can tell you are much more interested in getting to the root of the problem. Why are they hurt in the first place? Why are they suffering? And to do that, you're going to have to do a master's degree, doing something more on social justice, on justice work." So I went to London, and I studied at King's College in something called Environment and Development, and it was looking at how agriculture is affecting the environment. And from there, I discovered in the United Kingdom that there was this whole career you could have in protecting farmed animals. There was a much older movement there, and I started working for Compassion in World Farming as my very first job when I was 21, 25 years ago. And I really just stayed in that same lane. I just found my passion early, I found my path early, and I really didn't get out of it. And I just kept progressing along that path for protecting farmed animals.
How do you think you would have felt if you were a vet today and you just learned about why animals are going through so much pain?
Oh, I'd probably switch right away. I'd switch right away to being a vet activist for farmed animals, I imagine, for sure.
And in your view, what are some of the most pressing challenges the movement is facing today, and what strategies do you employ to address them?
One of the biggest issues we have is the rising population of human beings, and the fact that even if people eat less animals, more animals are being killed just because there's more humans on the planet. So it's just such a big challenge for us to think about how do we actually reduce the number of animals that are trapped in the system, that are eaten, that are exploited for food. Just the sheer magnitude of the task is our biggest problem. And the way we address that, I think, is by growing the movement, growing the people who are with us everywhere around the world, and making sure that we have the resources to equip people around the world to fight their battles in wherever they're from, however they feel is effective.
And so, what are some of the programs that MFA does to help the animal movement?
Well, our work really looks at two things: institutional change and culture change. So institutional change looks like changing governments and corporations in order to enact policies that protect farmed animals or increase plant-based diets. So that might look like in LA County, for example. We got LA County to adopt a vegan by default policy, meaning in all of their parks and services, in all of the hospitals that they own, they will be serving vegan by default. It also might look like getting a cage-free campaign, a government like Prop 12 in California, banning all cages and crates within the state of California and the sale of products. On the culture side, so institutional change are very fragile if they're not supported by the culture, meaning that a government could change its mind and go back. But if the culture wants this to change permanently, then it will stick. And so we also have to work on culture change. And this means changing norms and behaviors and values. And we do that through storytelling and alignment on the meaning of consumption of animals in this way. We can work with celebrities, we can do investigations that expose the realities, and really changing the narrative, changing what people know and how they feel and their values, and that can change behavior.
And how do you suggest that regular people who don't work for MFA, how do you suggest that they can help MFA with the work that they do?
Everyone has the capacity to be part of this movement, however big or small. An easy way, of course, is what you put on your plate and thinking consciously. If you eat animals, where did this animal come from, and am I okay with how they were treated? And just being aware of that is a first important step. Eating less animals and eating plant-rich diets is a very positive and easy way, even if it's once a day, but better all the time if you can get there. But I think it's very important when I say that for people to be able to try something without feeling purist, without feeling like if they don't do 100% that they fail. Another way is to be able to advocate to your local government, to write papers and stories in the media, talking to your family, however big or small, it can make a difference. And of course, donating to groups in your area that protect farmed animals.
And do you think that it would be a good idea for people to also spread the message in their communities? Like, for me, when I go to school, should I tell my friends more about veganism and how to protect animals?
Yes, definitely. I think the youth are really important. If you're going into your school, even if you have the opportunity, let's say they're saying you can research anything you want. Well, why not research on something on factory farming, and then you present that and you're educating your class in that subject? Or if you have the chance to volunteer at your school, why not suggest a sanctuary for your school or a field trip? If, let's say, they're going to the zoo, and this just happened in my son's school, and they wanted to go on a zoo field trip, and my son spoke out against that and said, I don't want to go to the zoo. The zoo is a prison for animals. I don't want to see that. I don't want my money to be spent like that. That's not fun. It's actually horrible for the animals. So there's like opportunities as kids that you can bring this into your communities, and you can do it in a way that is not judgmental, but is just standing close to your values and is trying to bring people with you.
Yeah, before I moved to Singapore, when I was still in Hyderabad, there was this zoo, and over there, all of the animals were in cages. And once in my school, we went on a field trip there, and it was like really sad to see because all of the animals, even like the giraffes, were kept in like cages and small enclosures.
Yes, it's not I mean, even being able to say that to your friends, to your teacher, it makes people think. And you never know the ripple effect you're going to create in asking questions and acknowledging the suffering of animals.
Yeah. And over the years, what are the notable advancements or changes you have observed within the movement?
I've been working in the movement for 25 years. 25 years ago, not a single company had a cage-free policy or a crate-free policy. Now thousands do because of our relentless efforts as a movement. 25 years ago, not a single state or country had policies to ban cages and crates. Now many, many do. 25 years ago, vegan was not a word that was recognized, and now it's been normalized. In the United States, we have the Impossible Burger at Burger King. You know, we have the Impossible Whopper, and this is normalized plant-based eating as a norm. We have Subway in Mexico who has plant-based options. None of this existed before. And if you had told me, so this actually coming month at the end of May, I don't know when this podcast is airing, we're launching our first campaign for shrimp welfare in London against Tesco. So if you're in London and you're listening, maybe you can come. It's May 30th. But if you told me 25 years ago that we were going to be launching a campaign to protect shrimp, I wouldn't have believed you. And here we are. We've made so much progress, and I can't wait to see what the next 25 years looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good job in all of the work that you've done. And listening to that, I can now hear that and see that over the past decades, there's been a huge growth, and because of all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm collectively, the movement is growing. Your parents are part of that. They're a huge part of that. And there's thousands and thousands of people who collectively create change together over the decades.
Mm-hmm. And you've written a book called Grilled, and that delves into the complexities of the chicken industry. So could you share some key insights from the book, and what motivated you to write it?
Writing is something I just love to do. It helps me process and understand what's happening and to create strategies. And one of the most important parts of the book is that I befriend a chicken factory farmer, and together we expose a big chicken company for calling the way the chickens are treated humane when they're not. And this was a very powerful moment for me in my activism, because before that I had seen chicken farmers as my enemy. And then when I actually met one and I had a conversation and I understood his position, I realized we were actually allies, that we both felt that the industry was not what it said it was, that it was trapping not just the chickens but the farmers. They're contract growers in the United States and many parts of the world who are unable to get out of chicken farming because they're in so much debt, but they would get out of it if they could. And so I found an unlikely ally in this farmer. And so the most important lesson is to be willing to talk to people you might think are your enemy, to be willing to enter uncomfortable conversations with the mindset of learning and potentially having allies that you didn't know were there.
I haven't read the book, but I really want to, because it sounds really, really cool, and it sounds really interesting that you've uncovered all of the secrets of the industry that everyone thought was like having really, really major improvements every day, but that they're actually trapping these farmers.
Yeah, that was a big change in our advocacy, was realizing farmers are our allies, not our enemy.
Yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. Dear listeners, I think you should really read the book. It sounds really interesting, and I'll read it as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug.
Are there any really, really big tips that you have for people who who can't necessarily go out and speak out? How do you think that they could help the movement if they can't go out and speak out, or if they're scared to, or if they can't?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you mean also not on social media, that they're scared on social media too?
Like if they're scared to speak out, if they're scared that people will not receive it in a good way.
I think educating yourself, there's a lot of good books about how to talk about this in a way that invites others. It's an invitation to others. So I think So it's books by Melanie Joy and Earthling Ed. They've written books that are on effective communication. So if you're worried about having the ability to get across your passion and advocate for animals but not be embarrassed or shut down, there's a lot of effective communication tools. I'd highly recommend Melanie Joy as an author, Earthling Ed, and others.
Yeah, and for me, the reason I asked that question is because sometimes in school, my friends like ask me if it's like sad not being able to eat meat, and sometimes if someone asks me if I'm vegetarian or vegan, the way they ask it is like they're a little bit disgusted, saying, "Oh, that food doesn't sound good."
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking that question, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that other people have also been in the same situation.
Oh, my kids are in it. They often say that, we pack their lunch, and so they'll be like, oh, they talk about our gross lunch, or, people will say you don't have enough protein and that's why you're weak, or they make, bullying kind of comments, and how do you behave and how do you respond to that? It's really challenging. How do you do it? What's your responses?
Well, once I gave my friends a taste of my food, and eventually they realized that it can actually be tasty without meat.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since then, they've kind of stopped. They still do it sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's become like really low. They don't do it every time they like see my lunch.
Yeah, I think that's a great way, is actually convincing them with taste. Is, I think, having great food, if you go to birthday parties or invite people over, just wowing them with the taste. I also think just being kind and understanding. People come from their cultures and their backgrounds. They're curious, and they're also afraid of change. And so being as open and kind and answering questions as possible. And there's different communication techniques you can do. When people say, oh, I eat meat, I just love meat, that's why I eat it. And you go, oh, what do you like about meat? And then you hear them talk about that and say, oh, did you grow up in a family that eats meat? And they go, yes, I did. And they said, oh, does anyone in your family have any heart problems, any diabetes? And then, it's called looping, and you try to kind of connect first where they are, and then dig and dig and dig until you can find a way to connect on something they also might have concern about.
That sounds like a really good idea. So, dear listeners, again, you should follow that advice because it's coming from an expert and it's really good advice.
Well, thank you. I'm sure you'll have more advice than I have by the time you're my age, given you're starting so young on your advocacy and communication.
Thank you. So thank you so much for coming on my show. I really enjoyed talking to you. I learned a lot from this interview.
Oh, thank you for having me. You're a very special human, and the animals are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, follow my Facebook page, Curious Vedant, to get updates on my upcoming episodes. To listen at leisure on your phone and get notified about future episodes, subscribe by searching for Curious Vedant wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube Podcasts, and many more. You can also listen to my show on curiousvedant.com. Thank you for listening to Curious Vedant, and don't forget to rate and leave comments.